Geography played a key role in the development of Egyptian civilization. The Nile River brought life to Egypt. Ancient Egypt included two regions, a southern region and a northern region. The southern region was called Upper Egypt. It was named that because it was located upriver in the relation to the Nile's flow of water. Lower Egypt, the northern part, was located downriver. The Nile helped the Egyptians in many ways. It stopped invasions on the Nile when they put up cataracts. It gave them a good source of water. Also, when the Nile would flood, it created farm land for the people. When the hunter-gatherers came, they found plants, wild animals, and fish there to eat. Over time, these people learned how to farm, and some people by the Nile, they learned how to irrigate. In time, strong leaders gained control over several villages. Some villages had grown and banded together to create two kingdoms, Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. In Upper Egypt, the ruler wore a red crown. In Lower Egypt, the ruler wore a cone-shaped white crown. Menes rose into power into Lower Egypt, but he wanted to unify the kingdoms together. He had his armies invade Lower Egypt and take control of it. Then he married a princess from Lower Egypt to strengthen his control over both kingdoms. He wore both a white and a red cone crown. Also, he was Egypt's first pharaoh, and he discovered Egypt's first dynasty. Menes built a new capital city at the southern tip of the Nile Delta, which was later named Memphis. The Old Kingdom was a period of Egyptian history that lasted for about 500 years. The system they developed was based on belief that Egypt's pharaoh was both a king and a god. Egypt believed that they belonged to the gods. As a result, the pharaoh had absolute power over all the land and people in Egypt. As population grew, social classes appeared. At the top of the classes was the pharaoh. Just below him were the upper classes, which consisted of priests and government officials. Next was the middle class, which consisted of scribes, lesser government officials, and a few rich craftspeople. The lower class was more than 80% of the population, which was farmers, servants, and slaves. The Egyptians practiced polytheism, and each village worshipped its own god. They built temples to the gods. Much of Egyptian religion focused on the afterlife. The belief in afterlife stemmed from their idea of a ka, or a person's life force. When a person died, his or her ka became a spirit and could not leave the burial site. That is why the Egyptians put things in the tomb the ka might need or want. After the person is dead, the Egyptians developed a method of embalming to preserve the body and which keeps it from decaying. They would preserve the body as a mummy. The Egyptians believed that burial sites and royal tombs were very important. For this reason, they built monuments in which to bury the rulers. The most known one is the pyramid. The Egyptians did a lot of engineering and building. The government paid the people working on the pyramids. Both the site and the shape of the pyramid were symbolic. Pointing to the sky above, the pyramids symbolized the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians wanted the pyramids to be good because the pharaoh, as their link to the gods, controlled everyone's afterlife. Making the pharaoh's spirit happy was one way of ensuring happiness in one's own afterlife.
Pharaohs had a hard time when they were invaded and lost a lot of land from the Hyksos. Later, Pharaoh rose to power and they had vengeance on Hyksos. This was the rise of a new kingdom. Egypt learned from the Hyksos invasion and built walls and towers to defend Egypt. After Egypt controlled a lot of land, they didn't have much of any threat. That's when trade started and trade routes were formed. Egypt had one threat to its power. Ramses the Great fought the Hittites, and neither could defeat the other. Later, the Sea Peoples defeated the Hittites and Egypt. It took Egypt 50 years to get back to normal. There were many jobs, but Egypt would never regain power. Egyptians had a special writing called hieroglyphics, which they taught kids along with math. When we discovered the Rosetta Stone, we were able to translate Greek and Egyptian writing. Egypt had great temples for the gods with obelisks as pillars in them.